There are many different ways that you guys can modify your rear wheel drive car. If you guys have one, you can build it for many different things. You can make it drift, you can make it awesome and track oriented, so you can make it awesome around turns, and you can also make it stupid fast in a straight line. Each one of these three builds, they're very similar in how you would get going. You want power, you want good handling, and you want tires. Now the tires are going to make a very big difference as to how the car is going to handle. You could put some really fat, really sticky tires in your car on the exact same setup as, say, a drift car, and it will hook pretty damn good. Now what I'm going to be doing today in this video is doing what almost every car should have, and that is modified suspension. So today in this video, I'm going to be replacing all the shocks and struts in this car with fully adjustable coilovers front and back. Now why am I going that route? Well, the nice thing about going to a coilover setup is that you can not only change the ride height, you can change the preload, the dampening, and you can make the suspension handle how you want. I was fortunate enough to pick up a set of coilovers that allows me to go with a stiffer setup up front and a very stiff setup in the back. So the stock setup for this car, the recommended coilover spring rate is 7K up front and 6K in the rear. I said, okay, that would be good if you wanted to get good grip. If you want to make the car handle nice around a circuit, that is the setup that you'd want to go with. But since that's not what I'm going for, I want this suspension to let loose. I want to have it so that the back end will lose traction from time to time. The reason why I'm installing these coilovers is that my stock setup is doing this. Whenever going around a turn, my suspension will roll and then turn. I don't want that because it makes the car pretty unpredictable. If you have a set of stiffer springs, even just regular coilovers, if I went with a 7 and 6 setup, it would be nicer to handle because instead of having the car roll and then turn, it would slightly roll and then turn. What I'm doing is going with a very stiff setup in the rear, so the back end will not want to roll at all. What's going to happen is that the car is going to want to just step out instead of rolling and then stepping out. So I'm going to show you guys the coilovers that I got today. Now I gave a little hint a little bit earlier with a special word that I said. I want to see if you guys can tell what coilovers I went with. Take a guess. Got a little bit of time. I'll give you guys a hint. The coilovers that I got with this car are BC BR coilovers. The coilovers that I have with my Accord are also BC Racing BR type coilovers. I did not go with BCs. I went with something else. If you guys are following me on Facebook, you know what coilovers I picked up. If you aren't following me on Facebook, check the link in the description box. It will direct you right to Facebook, so you guys will have updates and you guys will know of what's coming up in my future videos. So I've got my box of coilovers right here, and I mentioned that I was fortunate enough to pick up a set of coilovers. Any guesses? I got a set of Fortunato 500 coilovers. So here we go, guys. This is the unboxing for these things. Now I did not go with the standard set of coilovers. I upgraded a few things on these things and got the custom spring rate for what I was looking for. Ooh, this is nice. It's a certificate of assembly. A guy named Trey White built them with 8K fronts and 10K rears. Ooh, can't say I got that with my BC coilovers. So we have instructions. Is this for the install or just... Okay, so if you guys are new to installing coilovers, this is pretty much a good rundown as to what settings you'll have with these coilovers. So it's telling you how to mount it, how to adjust it. What else? Your warranty stuff. Yeah, so let's put that aside. This is a Generation 6 Fortune 500 series coilover. So what that means is some of the stuff is upgraded, some of the stuff is new, and a little bit different from the previous generations. So these coilovers that I picked up are handmade. They're gonna look something like that. The spring is powder coated, everything looks friggin' killer. Now what's nice about this is that it's got a digressive piston inside the actual shock body. What that means is that the piston is going to be going up and down, and it's gonna have a very large range of adjustment for when we wanna fine tune the suspension. Yeah, it's just gonna go through all the other coilovers that they have, and I'll tell you right now, they look unreal. And this is actually something really sweet. My next kind of build that I wanna do is going to have coilovers, but I also wanna have these air cups. The coilovers that I got do not come with these air cups, and this is really sweet for when you're driving on the street. Now what's nice about this is that if you're super low, you can actually raise the vehicle 2 full inches to get over speed bumps, curbs, people if you're a Mustang, or whatever for that matter. So that is sick because it mounts on your coil, you get different springs with it, And if you're buying a whole new set of coilovers for, say, your street car, maybe you like coilovers and you want the functionality of bags where you can raise it up and down, this is your best bet because you can track this whenever you want, and it's a nice streetable setup as well. Service and support. Yeah, these coilovers come with a 5-year warranty, which is unreal. You're not gonna find that with almost any other coilover on the market for this price. So I'll be straight up with you guys. These coilovers are a little bit more than a set of BC Racing coilovers, but from what I've seen, from what I've heard, and even the warranty alone, it is going to be well worth the money. Comes with some sweet stickers, and these coilover spanners are a little bit different than the standard ones that I had with my BCs. So these have a couple different adjustments in there. Not quite sure for what, but it has the regular adjustments right here for the perches on the coil. So I already opened up this box because I couldn't wait to see these coilovers for myself. So you guys ready for this? Look at these. Look at how nice that is. This is the front strut. So this is an 8 kilo spring. We've got our adjustment knob at the top, right there. And you can see that we have an adjustable camber plate at the top of it. I got a set of radial top mounts. So what that means is that this is gonna be able to move and rotate freely from the bottom part of the shock. On to the next one. Oh, look how good that is. Nice and smooth. Again, with the adjustable top hat, camber adjustment, everything. So we're gonna set that aside. So those two were the fronts. Now the rears on my car are a little bit longer of a setup. The strut itself is a little bit longer from the top hat to the bottom where it mounts up into the knuckle. Ooh, that's pretty. Look at that. That is sweet. So because there's no steering in the back, there's no adjustable top hat. Pretty straightforward. Now I'm gonna be doing one extra step. Since these things are brand new, I do not ever wanna have the possibility of these things seizing on me. So what I'm gonna do first is take off both the bottom cups, each one of these locking collars, and the perches up here. I'm gonna be taking all those out, putting a little bit of anti-seize on the threads, and then that way it's not gonna seize on me ever, and then I'm gonna put everything back to how it was. But here you guys have it. It looks sick. The backs look like they're an anodized green. Kind of matches the look of the car. So I'm gonna take the last one out of here, and we're gonna get with installing all these on the 240. Since my coilovers will be exposed to cold temperatures as I live in Canada, what I'm going to be doing to preventing any of these collars from seizing on me due to the cold temperatures is I'm going to be applying some Permatex aluminum anti-seize. Now what's nice about this product is that it's rated for temperatures from all the way down to negative 55 degrees Celsius all the way up to 870 degrees Celsius. So if it's that cold or that warm outside, there's no way in hell I'll be going outside and driving the car. But it's nice to know that the anti-seize is good for those temperatures. You guys know that I'm a little obsessive when it comes to taking care of my car. So when it comes to these coilovers, I'm going to protect them and make sure there's anti-seize on the entire thread from the top of the shock body all the way down to the bottom. So you can see that I'm unthreading the entire thing and applying a little bit of anti-seize on the threads. Now you don't really need to get it in all the threads because as soon as you install the lower mount onto the actual shock body, it's going to thread itself into all the little cracks and everything is going to be well lubricated and well spread. You're going to apply the anti-seize on the entire shock body. So you're going to move the lower mount, you're going to move the locking perches found on the both bottom and the top to hold the spring in place, and you're going to move everything so that the threads are in a different position, put some anti-seize on the threads, and then put everything back to the way it was. So when you're done, the thread should look a little something like this as opposed to this. Now the way that I'm going to set this up is you want to have both of the coilovers at the same ride height. So I'm gonna have the same amount of threads exposed here as here. So as you can tell, this is going to be a lot smaller and lower of a suspension on this side because this gap is smaller than this. I've got 10 full rotations from here from the full extent of the coilover inside. So the way that I'm going to set this up is I'm going to install the lower mount all the way up so it can't thread up into the shock body anymore. After that, I'm going to back it off a total of 10 threads. So since there's a sticker on the coilover, I'm just going to be counting how many times I see that sticker. Once I see that sticker rotate 10 times, I'm going to bring the lower perch and lock it down onto the lower mount. That way, the coilover is set to the proper ride height. With these hand-built coilovers now ready to go and ready for the install on the car, what I'm going to do is begin with the front end of the vehicle, lift it up in the air, and swap out the stock struts with these aftermarket ones. The stock suspension on the vehicle is pretty straightforward. The way that we're going to remove it is there's going to be 2 bolts found on the top of the knuckle and the bottom of the strut that hold everything in place. There's a little bracket found towards the front of the vehicle that's holding the wheel speed sensor in place, and you have to just remove a 12mm bolt to take that out. After that, there's the brake line that attaches to the strut itself, and we need to remove that so that we can disconnect the entire strut from the vehicle. Before we're able to remove the actual strut from the vehicle, we need to disconnect the 3 bolts that are holding the top of the strut in place. They're going to be held in place by 3 14mm nuts. After that, we can go back down into the wheel well, remove the 2 bolts that are holding the shock up to the spindle, and then everything should be free. After that, we should be able to wiggle everything out of the way. We can remove the strut from the wheel well and then compare the size, the weight, and everything else from the old strut to our new one. Taking a look at our new one, you can see that it's multiple pounds lighter, and it's not only newer, it's better, but it's completely adjustable. I was actually surprised when I saw this difference. I don't know why, but it looks like the new strut is a little bit more dense and it just looks heavier, but when you actually put it on a scale, it's not that way at all. We can continue with the install and bring the strut into the wheel well. Next, you're going to have to install the 3 nuts on the top of the top hat to hold it in place. Align the spindle into the lower mount of the coilover. Then use a jack to raise up the front suspension if it's too heavy to do this all by hand. Using a jack is going to make it easier so we can line it up and put our bolts through both of them nice and easily. Install both bolts through the lower mount in the spindle with the square washer attached to it so we can adjust the spindle for camber. Once you have the spindle angled in the correct way, tighten the nuts and the bolts together. Install the 12mm bolt into the bracket for the wheel speed sensor, followed by the brake line, and then the spring clip that holds the line into the back of the strut. Before we move on to the next strut, grab the spanner wrenches that came with your coilovers and make sure everything is snug. We don't want the lower mount or the spring to move up and down while we're driving due to road vibrations, so make sure everything is tight. I cannot wait to see how this coilover and the suspension setup all works out now that it's all pieced together. So I've got everything on the front sorted up, both passenger and driver side. Now it's time to jack the rear of the vehicle up and start working on the rear suspension. Alrighty, now with the rear of the vehicle jacked up in the air, we can get working by removing the rear strut that's attached down at the backside of the knuckle and found up top on the top of the body. Now removing this is going to be really easy and really straightforward. There's going to be 2 bolts found on the top that we need to get access from inside the vehicle, and then there's 1 bolt found down here that we need to remove. Once we disconnect both of those, we can remove and replace the entire strut with our new coilover. Considering we don't have any control arms or anything connected up to the shock itself, the swap is going to be pretty simple. So I'm going to start off by jumping in the back of the car and removing the rear tray that's covering up the bolts for the rear strut. Once you have that out of the way, you can go up to each one of the sides with a 12mm deep socket and unscrew and loosen each one of the nuts that are holding the strut up to the body of the car. Once you have both of those removed, you can go back down into the wheel well and disconnect the 1 bolt that's found on the back side of the knuckle. So that 1 bolt is the only thing that's holding it in place after that. Once you have that removed, you should be able to just push the strut out of the way, slide the entire strut down, and remove it from the car. So here we have the old struts on the rear of the car, and this here is the new strut. This is the one of 2 that we're going to be putting in the back. So for the rear struts, there is no difference from left and right side, so you can just throw it in whichever one you want. The fronts, however, were slightly different than that. So for the rear, let's just pick one and throw it in the back of the car. When installing aftermarket suspension on your car, you're going to want to work on 1 axle at a time. That way, if you have a difference in ride height from right side to left side with your stock strut versus your coilover, you're not going to be fighting the sway bar from left to right. When you do both of these at the time, you're going to want to install the knuckles at the same ride height for each side. With both struts side by side, you can see that when we move backwards, there's a very big difference in size. So what that's going to mean is that your sway bar is going to be fighting you when you're trying to make your stock suspension over here conform to the opposite side with your lowered suspension. So if this is your driver's side and this is your passenger side, you're going to be fighting your large sway bar or your stock size sway bar, that difference in height. That's why if you can do all the rear and all the front at the same time, you're gonna be doing yourself a very good and easy job. The installation is going to be a lot smoother. So if you can remove both struts, both rears, and do them at the same time, you're laughing. With both rear struts removed, we can now go ahead and install the coilovers one at a time. Now what's nice about this is that you're not going to be fighting again that distance for the sway bar. So what I'm going to do first is just put the bolt on the bottom side of the knuckle, attach it through the lower mount of the coilover. There are 2 bolts on the top of the shock that need to run through the body of the car. Once you have those lifted up into the body, we can go back into the interior of the car and put both of those bolts back in. Now, I'm not going to be doing any kind of dampening adjustment or preload adjustment now. I'm going to fine tune the vehicle and the suspension once I have the car driving and once I'm kind of used to the vehicle. Last but not least, make sure that you have each one of the locking perches snug up against the top part for the spring and the bottom part for the lower mount. Once you have all of that tightened up, you can go ahead and throw your wheels back on the car, lower the car down onto the ground, and since we're actually lower than normal, I'm going to be using these race ramps to help me get down. So guys, first impressions of these coilovers, drives really nice. I have the dampening adjustments on the rear set to all the way soft and the front to a little bit more than all the way soft. I think it's 4 clicks up. And the reason why I went with that is because the rear suspension has very stiff springs, I don't need a stiff shock. So you can adjust that to any way you want. These are fully 24-way adjustable. You can make it super stiff or super soft by just getting out the car, taking a look at each one of the tops of the struts, and turning the little dial. The longest part of doing the entire job was putting the anti-seize on all the threads of the coilovers. Since I had to take everything apart, put it all back together, put lube in there and everything, that honestly took longer than installing the coils themselves. Before I went ahead and actually did the install video for these coilovers, I went ahead with an impact driver and a couple wrenches and took all the nuts and bolts off, so I knew that it was going to be fairly easy. If you guys can do that before you guys go ahead and do any job, it will make it a lot easier. As for the video and the parts themselves, if you guys want to buy anything that I used in this video, you guys can check the description box. From the coilovers to the anti-seize to even my impact gun, you guys can check the description box. I make it super easy for you guys. All you got to do is scroll down, click, and it's in your Amazon shopping cart. If you guys have any questions regarding the video, throw them down in the comment section below, and I'll be more than happy to help. Again, guys, thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the